In Act 2, Scene 3 of Macbeth, Duncan's body is discovered, and all the guests at Macbeth's castle get to react to it. But before Duncan's body is discovered, there is a brief interlude that features the only comic relief moment in the play Macbeth. Shakespeare always tried to include some elements of comic relief in even his serious plays. Part of this was because of the groundlings and trying to keep them amused. And the porter is definitely aiming his comedy at the groundlings. He is telling sex jokes and body functions and physical comedy. He is aimed to please those groundlings, which is, of course, where you and I would be. He is also there as a moment of catharsis. Catharsis is an emotional relief or an emotional shift that either allows you to pour out emotions you were holding on to or kind of softens and changes the emotions of the scene. And so the porter is a good comic interlude after this dark, bloody scene of Act 2, Scene 2. The Macbeths just left the stage still covered in blood, despite all their talk of water. And so now here enters the porter, which gives the audience a chance to kind of calm down after the bloody scene that they've just witnessed. So, who is this porter? The porter is he's kind of like the bellhop. His job is to port or to carry the bags and such of the guests that are coming. His job is to answer the door. So he is a servant who is supposed to be welcoming guests and taking care of the guests. It is, of course, the middle of the night when the Macbeths finish murdering Duncan, and the knocking sound that they were hearing was actually someone knocking at the gates of the castle. And so it's the porter's job to go answer that door. But as he will explain himself, once they arrive, he has spent his entire night drinking, and so he is incredibly drunk. The porter he is always a fun one in a live production. And if you saw the Smyrna High production last 2 years ago, I think it was, they were very funny. They wandered through the audience and kind of made jokes with the audience. And the makers of a play can really ham up this scene. It seems relatively short in just listening to it, but it is a memorable scene when you go see the play. And so pay attention for the comedy of the moment. He begins by kind of pretending that he is the porter at the gates of hell and that he's letting in people who have died and gone to hell for several reasons. And so there's a bit of irony there in that a murder just occurred at the place where he works and he's referring to it as hell. But then later, once he actually begins talking to the person that he has just let in, he will start to tell some sex jokes that I'm not going to pause to explain to you. But if you would like explained, you can click on the little text box there on My Shakespeare and enjoy the inappropriate humor all you want. And therefore, without further ado, the porter.
Oh, here's a knocking indeed. If a man were porter of Hellgate, he should have all turning a key. Knock, knock, knock. Who's there in the name of Beelzebub? Here's a farmer that hanged himself on the expectation of plenty. Oh, come in, time. Have napkins now about you here, you'll sweat for it. Knock, knock. Who's there in the other devil's name? Faith, here's an equivocator. I could swear in both the scales against either scale who committed treason enough, for God's sake, yet could not equivocate to heaven. Oh, yes, come in, equivocate. No. Hey, self! Hey! Oh, here's an English tailor come hither for stealing out the French hills, huh? Oh, come in, tailor. Here you may roast your goose. No, never inquire, where are you? Oh, but this place is too cold for hell. I'll double porter it no further. I had thought to have let in some of all professions that go to Primrose Way at the everlasting bonfire. I pray you, remember the porter. Was it so late, friend, ere you went to bed, that you do lie so late? Faith, sir, we're carousing till the second cock, and drink, sir, is a great provoker of three things. What three things does drink especially provoke? Marry, sir, nose painting, sleep, and urine. Lechery, sir, it provokes and unprovokes. It provokes the desire, but it takes away the performance. Therefore, much drink may be said to be an equivocator with lechery. It makes him and it mars him. It sets him on and it takes him off. It persuades him and disheartens him. Makes him stand to and not stand to. In conclusion, equivocates him in his sleep, and gain him the lie, or leaves him. I believe drink gave thee the lie last night. Oh, it did, sir. It had a very throat on me. But I requited him for his lie, and I think being too strong for him. Though he took up my legs sometimes, yeah, I made a shifty cast him. Is thy master stirring? I'll knock him as a wake him. Here he comes.
All right. So I meant to mention before we went through that to equivocate means to lie, and he uses equivocate and equivocator a lot in this scene. He's a pretty entertaining guy, and I hope you do check out his short conversation there. But now we need to meet Macduff. Macduff is the Thane of Fife, and he will become a very important character. This is the first we've met of him, though, here in Act 2. And so a couple of things you need to know about Macduff is, first of all, he does not like Macbeth. They have a rivalry that predates this play. You can tell from the minute they meet that Macduff does not respect him, even though everybody else does. And that Macduff is he is not a fan of Macbeth. Basically, everybody else loves him, not Macduff. One of the reasons, and I'm just going to throw this in here real quick, that I think, and I've read a little bit about it, that he might not like Macbeth right now in this moment, is that the old Thane of Cawdor was captured in Fife. If you go back to Act 1, you'll see that battle took place in Fife. And therefore, since the Thane of Cawdor was captured in his territory, he might think that he deserves that title. So that might be one reason. He's a little jealous of Macbeth, if nothing else. But so anyway, he arrived late to this whole thing and is now arriving. And he'll tell us in just a minute that because he arrived so late, that Duncan had asked Macduff to show up and wake him up, basically. And so that is what he has arrived to do. Macbeth now enters to greet his guests, and he has taken a minute, like Lady Macbeth said, to go put on his nightgown to look like he got awakened out of bed, and he has at this point washed the literal blood off of his hands. So now we get to watch through this scene as Duncan is discovered to see, can Macbeth and Lady Macbeth pull this off? Are they good actors and actresses? Can they look like the innocent flower and hide what they did? She said in Act 1 that they needed to make their grief clamor and roar. Are they going to be able to do that convincingly? And so this thinks back to the line that you interpreted for your warm-up today about an unfelt sorrow being the office that an untrue man does easily. Are they going to easily be able to show unfelt sorrow? That is the question for you to listen for as we move through this scene. Also keep in mind, there are a bunch of people who are about to come on stage because everybody who spent the night at the castle is going to be wakened up by a clanging bell once Duncan's body is discovered. So try to imagine the chaos of this scene. Everybody from servants to ladies to Duncan's sons, Malcolm and Donalbain, everybody running on the stage. So there's a lot of chaos and confusion going on in this scene.
Good morrow, noble sir.
Good morrow, both.
Is the king stirring, worthy thane?
Not yet.
He did command me to call timely on him. I have almost slept the hour.
I'll bring you to him.
I know this is joyful trouble to you, but yet 'tis one.
The labor we delight in physics pain. This is the door.
I'll make so bold to call, for 'tis my limited service.
Goes the king hence today?
He does. He did appoint so.
The night has been unruly. Where we lay, our chimneys were blown down, and as they say, lamentings heard in the air. Strange screams of death and prophesying with accents terrible of dire combustion and confused events new hatched to the woeful time. The obscure bird clamoured the livelong night. Some say the earth was fevers and did shake.
'Twas a rough night.
My young remembrance cannot parallel a fellow to it.
Horror! 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 Tongue nor heart cannot conceive nor name thee.
What's the matter?
Confusion now hath made his masterpiece. Most sacrilegious murder hath broke ope the Lord's anointed temple and stole thence the life of the building.
What is't you say?
The life
Knew his majesty.
approach the chamber and destroy your sight with a new gorgon. Do not bid me speak. See, and then speak yourselves. Awake! Awake! Ring the alarm bell! Murder and treason. Banquo and Donalbain! Malcolm! Awake! Shake off this downy, sleek death's counterfeit and look on death itself. Up! Up and see the great doom's image. Malcolm! Banquo! As from your graves rise up and walk like sprites to countenance this horror. Ring the bell!
What's the business that such a hideous trumpet calls to parley the sleepers of the house? Speak! Speak!
Oh, gentle lady, 'tis not for you to hear what I can speak. The repetition in a woman's ear would murder as it fell. Oh, Banquo, our royal master's murdered.
Whoa! Alas! What, in our house?
Too cruel anywhere. Dear Duff, I prithee contradict thyself and say it is not so.
Had I but died an hour before this chance, I had lived a blessed time. For from this instant there's nothing serious in mortality. All is but toys. Renown and grace is dead, the wine of life is drawn, and the mere lees is left this vault to brag of.
So, first of all, when Macduff is the one who discovers Duncan's dead body, and you get to hear his reaction, oh, horror, horror, and he begins to shout. Before we move forward, though, I want to point out these things that Lennox has to say. Lennox is another lord. He's another thane, and he gets several important roles in the play. He points out that nature was restless. Nature was unruly last night. And he gives several examples. He talks about the howling wind, which sounded like it was prophesying terrible acts. And he even says there was some kind of earthquake. He says the earth was feverish and did shake. And these are things that we're going to need later when we talk about the unnatural events in the natural world as well as in the human world. As Macduff wakes everybody up, he starts to shout. Notice that Macbeth and Lennox leave to go see for themselves. Macbeth has to act like he has no idea what he's talking about. What is it you say? The life? He acts very confused. He and Lennox go to find out while Macduff wakes everybody up. Lady Macbeth comes out. What is going on here? I love the irony of Macduff turning to her and saying, "Oh, gentle lady, 'tis not for you to hear what I can speak." A woman couldn't stand this kind of knowledge. So first of all, the irony of calling her a gentle lady, since we know what she's capable of. And then for him to say, "I would never, I can't tell a woman this," when she was involved in it. She does a pretty good job with "whoa, alas," acting all upset. But I want us to pause. I paused here so we could look at Macbeth's short little speech here. He re-enters with Lennox and Ross, who has now showed up. And he says, "Had I but died an hour before this, I would have lived a blessed time." What would be different if Macbeth had died an hour ago? Duncan was alive. If he had died an hour ago, he would not have lived to be a murderer. And so while Macbeth is putting on a front here, and he is mourning in a way that makes everybody think he just discovered it, this also kind of gives him an opportunity to vent his true feelings. Because as we saw at the end of the last scene, he already regrets having killed Duncan. And so when he says that he would have lived a blessed life, he's kind of telling the truth a little bit. Those are his true feelings. He goes on to say, "For from this instant there's nothing serious in life. All is but toys. Renown and grace is dead." He says, "The honor and grace that was our king is dead. The wine of life is drawn. The mere lees is left the vault to brag of." So the lees, the dregs, that is the stuff that settles to the bottom of wine. They're the little particles of, I don't know, just like the things that wine is made of. They're little particles that if you ever get to see a really expensive bottle of wine that's really old and you hold it up to the light, you can kind of see these particles swilling around in there. You're not supposed to drink that part. Those are just the stuff that's left over in the bottom after all the good stuff is gone. And that is his metaphor for life now. He says life is just the nasty leftovers because all the good stuff is gone. So this is his chance to kind of actually vent. Now Malcolm and Donalbain enter, and notice the way they respond, because they are Duncan's sons. They stand to be affected the most by this loss. And so keep an eye on them, because it is kind of chaotic on stage and they fall a little bit into the background here.
What is amiss?
You are. And do not note, the spring, the head, the fountain of your blood is stopped. The very source of it is stopped.
Your royal father's murdered. Oh! By whom?
Those of his chamber, as it seemed, had done it. Their hands and faces were all badged with blood, so were their daggers, which, unwiped, we found upon their pillows. They stared and were distracted.
No man's life was to be trusted with.
Oh, yet I do repent me of my fury that I had killed them.
Wherefore did ye so?
Who can be wise, amazed, temperate and furious, loyal and neutral in a moment? No man. The expedition of my violent love outrun the pauser, reason. Here lay Duncan, his silver skin, laced with his golden blood, and his gash stabs looked like a breach in nature for ruin's wasteful entrance. There, the murderers, steeped in the colours of their trade, their daggers unmannily breached with gore. Who could refrain that had a heart to love, and in that heart courage to make love known?
Oh, help me, and so.
Look to the lady.
Oh,
Why do we hold our tongues that most may claim this argument for ours? Should be spoken here where our fate hidden in order whole may rush and seize us. Let's away, our tears are not yet brewed, nor our strong sorrow upon the fruit of motion.
Look to the lady! And when we have our naked frailties hid that suffer in exposure, let us meet and question this most bloody piece of work to know it further. Fears and scruples shake us. In the great hand of God I stand, and thence against the undivulged pretense I fight of treasonous malice.
And so do I.
So all, let's briefly put on manly readiness and meet in the hall together.
Well, what will you?
All right, notice that Malcolm and Donalbain are the only two left on stage now, and now they have to decide what they are going to do with the information that their father has been murdered.
Do. Let's not consort with them. To show an unfelt sorrow is an office which the false man does easy. I'll to England. To Ireland I. Our separated fortune shall keep us both the safer. Where we are, there's daggers in men's smiles. The near in blood, the nearer bloody. This murderous shaft that shot hath not yet lighted, and our safest way is to avoid the aim. Therefore to horse, and let us not be dainty of leave-taking, but shift away. There's warrant in that theft which steals itself when there's no mercy left.
All right, so I apologize for all the coughing. So first of all, Macbeth is so dramatic, and when he is trying to tell Malcolm and Donalbain that their father has been killed, he just gets all metaphorical. The spring, the head, the fountain of your blood is stopped. And Macduff has to cut in and be like, your royal father's murdered. And so then they kind of get overshadowed again. And Macbeth, Malcolm says, who did this? And Lennox says, well, apparently the grooms, the guards of the chamber. And Macbeth reveals here that he killed the guards. When he went up there to see Duncan's bloody body, killed the guards. And he claims he did it out of fury and out of, he says, violent love for Duncan. But of course, we know that one of the main reasons he would have wanted to kill the guards is to get rid of witnesses. That was really convenient that he was able to do that. And he gives this long description here of Duncan laced in blood, looked like a breach in nature, the gory daggers. And here Lady Macbeth had a hint. Macduff had already said that this was the kind of thing that would murder as it fell on a woman's ear. So she knows how she's expected to respond. So when she hears all of this gore being described, she's like, oh, here's my chance. Oh, help me. Oh, and she pretends to faint. At this point, Banquo sets a plan. He says, we need to all go get dressed for the day. Then we need to come back together and make a plan. We need to talk about this. And he makes this vow, and everyone, and so do I, so all, he's in the great hand of God I stand to fight against treasonous malice. So they all kind of make a gentleman's agreement that they will find who was responsible, meaning that they're not entirely sure the guards were responsible. They're not willing to accept that that is what happened here. After they leave, Malcolm and Donalbain are left alone to decide what they need to do about the fact that their father was murdered. And they decide that they need to get the heck out of there. They decide that it is not safe. And they have a couple of important lines that reveal that. Malcolm, first of all, saying our line from the warm up, to show an unfelt sorrow is an office which the false man does easily. So Malcolm is saying that they should not trust anybody because anybody could be faking that. Donald Bain says the same thing again. There are daggers and smiles. We can't trust these guys. Basically, they realize somebody in this castle killed our father, and that person is still in this castle. Malcolm makes it really clear down here, this murderous shafts that shot has not yet lighted, and our safest way is to avoid the aim. So they know they are targets. Malcolm in particular is set to be the very next king. And so they decide to leave. They decide to leave Scotland, and Donalbain will go to Ireland, and Malcolm will go to England. And he says our separated fortune will keep us both the safer. If we separate, it'll be harder for them to kill both of us. And so they run off for safety's sake. And that is where this chaotic scene ends, with not just Duncan, but also the guards dead. And everyone is going to make a plan. Malcolm and Donalbain are going to flee the country.